this list, in our number 10 spot, we have the Fairmont Banff Spring Hotel. This Canadian hotel is absolutely legendary, but despite the spooky tales, tourism remains as high as ever. This hotel was built in 1888 in order to encourage tourists and to sell train tickets, and while it certainly did just that, this chateau-style hotel was only the icing on the cake to a trip to the gorgeous Rocky Mountains and all that waits in the Banff National Park. Through the years, though, several guests have had some haunting stories to tell, which included reports of ghost sightings. These ghosts are thought to reside in the hotel, and they include a bride who allegedly fell down the stone staircase during her wedding, which led to her untimely departure, or the legend of Sam the Bellman. This legend has it that Sam worked at the hotel until 1975, and before leaving, he claimed that he would come back to haunt the hotel. It is said that his spirit can be seen in the hotel, helping people with their bags. In our number 9 spot today, we have Zunantanich. This location sits deep in the jungles of Belize, located less than a mile from the border of Guatemala. It has an unbelievably rich history, as it is an ancient Maya ruin that has been abandoned for the last 1,000 years. In 1890, this site had its modern discovery, and since then it has been an important site for archaeology, an amazing tourist attraction, but also it is said to be a hotspot for the paranormal. It is said that the site is haunted by a female ghost. She has black hair and glowing red eyes. Referred to as the Stone Lady, it is said that she was first spotted by one of the first research teams in the area in 1893, and since then she has been frequently seen by the tallest building complex called El Castillo. No one exactly knows the story behind the Stone Lady considering the history of this site, but many believe she may have been a part of a ritual sacrifice, which was a tradition and spiritual practice done by the ancient Maya civilization. In our number 8 spot today, we have Burg Eltz. This German castle dates back to 1157, so it's no surprise that there are many myths and legends surrounding it. The most common tale is that of a young countess named Agnes. Agnes was betrothed or promised to another noble, but after meeting him, she called off their future wedding. Apparently this guy was the worst, and also even if he wasn't, no one could really blame her for calling off a wedding she didn't want to have. But of course, things quickly went awry. This noble guy was mad that she had rejected him, so the scorned lover laid siege to the castle. Agnes fought to defend her home, but she passed away during the battle. That is the story behind why her spirit is said to haunt the Burg Eltz castle. Many say the strongest presence is felt in her former bedroom. It is said that her spirit is quite mournful, and apparently her battle armor and axe remain on display as well. In our number 7 spot today, we have the Eden Brown Estate. This estate is located in Nevis, which is the smaller of the two islands that comprise the nation of St. Kitts and Nevis in the Caribbean. It is said that despite having just as much to offer, Nevis is often overshadowed by St. Kitts. That is, until people hear of this ghostly haunting. Eden Brown Estate is a former plantation that now lies in ruin. The estate was once owned by a businessman who was going to give the property to his daughter as a wedding present. Legend goes that on the wedding day there was a very mysterious duel between the groom and his best man that ended up leaving both of the men dead. Because of this tragic happening on what should have been her wedding day, the businessman's daughter remained unmarried and alone for the rest of her life, which meant that when she passed, there was no one to leave the estate to. Now visitors of the estate report seeing the spirit of a reclusive woman as she roams about the grounds. Aside from this story, who knows what other kind of horrors and absolute tragedies that this place has seen. In our number 6 spot today, we have Bangar Fort. Bangar Fort is located in India, just 100 miles southwest of Delhi. This place is pretty much completely abandoned, as it is said to have had a curse placed on it. Apparently many years ago, a sorcerer tried to woo a local princess, in which she rejected him. He got so upset that he decided that cursing this town was his only course of action. I just have to mention that none of these are a normal reaction to being rejected, and calling it an overreaction would honestly be an understatement. This fort now is closed to visitors after sundown because of all the spooky happenings that go on here. This fort is extremely beautiful, so it's no wonder the paranormal doesn't keep people out. People have reported having extremely strong feelings of an otherworldly presence, and even some have reported hearing voices that are seemingly coming from nowhere. In our number 5 spot today, we have the Whaley House. The Whaley House is located in San Diego and it was built in 1857. The site that this family house was built on was actually the location of San Diego's first public gallows, so as you can imagine, that's a pretty good backstory for a haunted site. Right after moving in, Thomas Whaley reported that he could hear the footsteps of Yankee Jim Robinson, who had been hanged at the gallows just 4 short years before the house was built. After moving in, the Whaley family began to experience a bunch of family tragedies, many of which actually happened inside of the house. The Whaley house is now a museum, and apparently the family members continue to haunt the site. These paranormal occurrences are apparently often accompanied by the smells of cigar smoke and heavy perfumes. In our number 4 spot today, we have Obvodny Canal. Obvodny Canal is located in St. Petersburg, Russia, and this whole thing just really creeps me out. This man-made canal was built in the late 18th century, and ever since then there has been extremely strange occurrences at this location. Construction workers would complain of headaches. They would also sometimes even have random outbursts of violent behavior that was uncharacteristic of them. But the craziest, most unsettling part is what has given this location full cursed status. Many of these people have attempted to take their own lives. Sadly, most of the attempts were successful, but the few people who have been saved have explained that they have no idea why they did it. They say that they didn't really have intentions beforehand, and some have even said that they felt some sort of invisible force pulling them into the water. Apparently there are some sinister souls that live beneath the surface of the water, and there have even been reports of seeing a lady in white in the water before she suddenly disappears. Long story short, remind me to just never ever go here. In our number 3 spot today, we have the Eastern State Penitentiary. The Eastern State Penitentiary is located in Philadelphia, and of course it used to be a prison, but it is now an abandoned and extremely haunted house. This prison used to house some pretty big profile prisoners such as Al Capone and Willie Sutton, but it was different from the American prisons we are used to now. This is because this prison was entirely separate incarceration. The inmates would live, sleep, eat, and everything else alone. When they were removed from their cells, they would have hoods placed over their heads as well. Considering all we now know about how detrimental isolation is, this of course must have taken an immense toll on the prisoners. Beside this, there were also some pretty gruesome and horrible punishments in this prison, such as having prisoners' tongues chained to their wrists. I'm honestly not even sure how you would do that, but apparently it was a thing. This prison now sees thousands of voluntary visitors every year, and there have been plenty of reports of some creepy paranormal happenings. These reports include seeing shadowy figures, hearing creepy laughter that doesn't belong to anyone living, and hearing footsteps throughout the prison. I feel like considering all that went on when this prison was active, it truly does make sense that this building would be a haunted one. In our number 2 spot today, we have Raynham Hall. Raynham Hall is located in England and was built around 1620, and it is a large building on 7,000 acres, which is obviously quite impressive. The tale that follows this haunted building is that of Lady Dorothy Dolly Townsend and her husband Viscount Turnip Townsend. I can't believe a couple with the nicknames Dolly and Turnip have an evil history, but unfortunately, they do. The story goes that Turnip kept Dolly locked up in the house, which is obviously just terrible and very cruel. After her passing, it's no wonder she decided to stick around and haunt the house. Apparently, there was a photo taken of her ghost in 1930, and it is said that no one has ever been able to prove it was a fake, so all you photo experts out there, take a look and let me know what you think. A lot of the places on this list now serve as haunted houses, but apparently this one is still lived in by the Raynham family. Hence the name. In our number 1 spot today, we have Forsyth Park. One thing I didn't know is that apparently the entire city of Savannah, Georgia is a pretty haunted place due to the creepy tunnels that are located underneath the city. But one of the most notable, highly haunted places within the city is Forsyth Park. Apparently there used to be a hospital across the street, and there would be autopsies performed in the tunnels below the park. I personally feel like autopsies are already creepy enough, so I'm not sure if conducting them in an underground tunnel was exceptionally necessary, but hey, I can't change the past. Because of this scary practice, the park has seen a lot of paranormal activity since these days, and it usually is the sort of place where one second you'll see a strange figure, but as soon as you blink or look away, it disappears just as quickly as it suddenly appeared.
Number 10. The Eden Brown Estate in the Caribbean. During a trip to St. Kitts, you can take a short ferry ride over to its sister island, Nevis, and visit a haunted former sugar plantation plantation that now lies in ruins. The Eden Brown estate was once owned by a wealthy businessman named John, who planned to gift the plantation to his daughter, Julia Huggins, and her fiancé, Walter Maynard, after they married. However, both men died after feuding. It's presumed that the feud occurred during a fight over John's harsh treatment of his slaves. Walter's family was known to be much more lenient and gentle to their slaves. However, some believe that a slave mistress was the reason for their fight. Now, whatever the source of their feud, legend has it that Walter flung his drink into John's face and the two went to the courtyard to finish the duel. They both drew their pistols and shot one another. After the death of both men, the mansion was left to ruin and subjected to the ravages of time. It's said that Julia lost her mind after the incident and never married, living out the rest of her years in solitude. To this day, locals claim they can still feel her sad spirit roaming around the property, making it one of the most haunted places to visit in the Caribbean. Number 9. Malahide Castle, Ireland. Dublin, Ireland has a rich haunted history that spans back centuries. If you're looking to find some paranormal activity there, you can start by heading to Malahide Castle, one of Ireland's oldest castles and among the best medieval castles in Europe. It's said to be haunted by at least 5 ghosts. A mystery lady in white who has a painting of her wearing a white flowing dress in the Great Hall. No one knows who she is or how her portrait came to be at the Malahide Castle. Nonetheless, on many occasions, this young lady steps out of her portrait and wanders the castle halls. Another ghost, Puck, is the people's favorite ghost. Puck was a dwarf. In addition to being a jester, Puck was a watchman who lived in one of the towers. Most versions of his death say Puck was mysteriously stabbed on a snowy December night just outside the castle walls. He was wearing his jester suit, complete with cap and bells. Puck was found before he died, and with his dying breath, he vowed to haunt Malahide Castle. Puck is now a mischievous spirit who enjoys photobombing. Number 8. Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum, USA. The Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum is located in West Virginia and was constructed between 1858 and 1881. It was designed by the renowned architect Richard Andrews following the Kirkbride Plan, which called for long rambling wings arranged with staggered formation, assuring that each of the connecting structures received an abundance of therapeutic sunlight and fresh air. The original hospital, designed to house 250 people, was opened to patients in 1864 and reached its peak in the 1950s with 2,400 patients in overcrowded and generally poor conditions. It closed in 1994 after 400 to 500 people died there. They performed over 4,000 lobotomies, which left some healthy patients with brain damage and hemorrhages. Legend says that you may see or hear one of the patients or see one of their common ghosts named Lily. She was one of the patients from the Civil War era that died from pneumonia at the age of 9. Witnesses say if you step in her playroom, you can hear her cries and laughs. There's also the ghost of Dean, the patient who met his unfortunate demise at the wrong end of a bed frame, and has been known to spend time in the room where he died. Port Arthur, Australia. There are many spooky tours around Port Arthur to satisfy worldly ghost hunters. The Tasmanian town is filled with reports of paranormal activity, which makes sense given its creepy past. The spot originally served as a penal colony in the 19th century, where prisoners were forced to endure solitary confinement and mandatory church services to correct bad behavior. Described as hell on earth, Port Arthur became a self-sufficient prison settlement where convicts worked in chain gangs producing clothing, furniture, and vegetables. Conservative estimates say that 1 in 4 Tasmanians, who number 4,700–500,000 of Australia's 19 million population, are descendants from the 12,000 men, women, and children who passed through Port Arthur between 1830 and 1877 as convicts from England. One tour here traces path through the church built by the convicts, the parson's house, doctor's office, and morgue hidden in the hills. Here, 5 or 6 century-old ghosts are said to reappear to tourists and locals alike, and some blurred specters captured on film are displayed for the skeptical. We've had people leave the tour before the first stop because it's freaked them out. Imagination is a wonderful thing, said a tour guide. Number 6. The Wall of Tears, Galapagos. While the Galapagos is known for its abundant flora and fauna, the eco-destination also has a spooky side with a dark history on one of its islands. Located in the town of Puerto Villamil on Isabel Island, island, the Wall of Tears is a 300-foot-long barrier made of volcanic rocks built over 14 years back in the 1940s and 50s. The establishment of a penal colony here was an easy choice for authorities, as they knew it was virtually impossible for anyone to escape the remote island. Now, back then, the small Galapagos Island housed several criminals who were forced to build this seemingly inturnable wall as part of their sentence. Out in the sweltering heat, they would collect the heavy, sharp lava rocks from around the island and place them along the wall. Some people say the wall was never finished, as it was meant to be a wall that would surround the actual prison area. But it's more likely that it was simply a make-work project as a punishment to those sent here. The torturous forced labor resulted in the deaths of many of these criminals, and locals say you can still hear their desperate cries at the unfinished wall from time to time. Number 5. Akesh's Fortress, Norway. This medieval castle served as a defensive stronghold for the city of Oslo and is rumored to be the most haunted place in Norway. For many years, parts of the castle served as a prison for some of Norway's most notorious criminals. The sentence often involved grueling physical labor, and the prison was infamous for using irons, chains, and prisoner isolation as disciplinary techniques. It closed as a prison in 1950, but over the years there have been numerous reports of whispers and scratching along the fortress halls, and many guards have reported weird experiences, like the sensation of being pushed while alone on duty. Many visitors and employees claim to have experienced something that they cannot declare. Most of the paranormal occurrences are the common phenomena: people hear footsteps, disembodied voices, and smell strange smells. But there are some claims that have been around for centuries. The most popular sightings including a demon dog named Malkazian, I hope I said that right, who is said to guard the gates of the castle. But if you are bitten by this dog, you are bound to die within 3 months, and of course in a very unhappy and painful way. And for decades, people have claimed to see a woman appear from the darkness wearing a long dark cloak who has no face. Number 4. The Paris Catacombs, France. Oh, the French. If you're in the mood for a little darkness while visiting Paris, ditch that tour of the Eiffel Tower and go see the famous Paris Catacombs. What are the catacombs, you ask? It's a place where skulls and bones line the walls of century-old tunnels. With around 6 million corpses buried inside, there are plenty of urban legends and ghost stories lurking in the skeletal maze. These include a group of explorers finding a video camera left on the ground in the early 1990s. From the video, they could tell the man holding the camera was lost and had no idea how to escape, and the man was going mad in the underground network of tunnels. To this day, no one knows who he was or if he ever managed to get out alive. Also, you can't be there after midnight because that's when the walls begin to speak. It's said disembodied voices will try to persuade you to venture even deeper into the catacombs until you can't find your way out again. The catacombs span almost 200 miles long, but only a mile of the tunnels is open to the public. And yet, that hasn't stopped others from trying to enter closed-off areas of the catacombs, though it's through its many secret entrances hidden around Paris. Number 3. Ancient Ram Inn, England. The Ancient Ram Inn, found in Wanton-under-Edge, England, is a 12th century inn and one of the oldest in the Western world. It's believed to have once been a pagan burial ground and is now haunted by more than 20 spirits. Perhaps the most famous is a witch that was burned at the stake in the area during the 1500s at the height of witch hunting. The woman fled from potential trial by government-sanctioned witch hunters and took refuge in the Ancient Ram Inn. She was soon captured, though, and burned at the stake. The room where she hid has been dubbed the Witch's Room, and her spirit is believed to be haunting it to this day. There are also stories of spirits of ritually murdered people, exorcisms, and other dark hauntings that took place. Orbs of these spirits have been photographed, and the place has been investigated by many paranormal researchers, particularly for television shows like Ghost Adventures and Most Haunted. Number 2. Fairmont Banff Springs, Canada. Ever since it was complete in 1888, this hotel has been associated with paranormal activity. One of the most famous legends is of the ghost bride who on her wedding day, decked out in her wedding gown, descended one of the hotel's marble staircases. Something startled her, causing her to slip and fall, and she died on those steps. Since then, hotel staff and guests alike have reported seeing a veiled figure moving up and down the stairs, or seeing a figure in a wedding dress dancing in the ballroom upstairs, pining for the first dance with her husband she never had. Stories of Sam Colley, a genial old Scotsman who was a head bellman during the 60s and 70s, has been circulating around the hotel since his passing in 1975. Supposedly, Sam is a helpful sort of spirit, and most stories involving him mention some service he provided to staff or guests. There are also haunted rooms, as guests have reported having their pillows yanked out from under their heads while they slept, or even being pushed off the bed by some unseen entity. In another room, an entire family was murdered there, and ever since, guests in the room have reported being awakened by screaming, and when they turn the lights on, they would see bloody handprints on the mirror. And coming in at number 1, the Old Vicarage, Sweden. Borgvanet is a small village in northern Sweden. It only has 50 residents, a church, and a vicarage. That old vicarage is extremely haunted, perhaps the most haunted place in Sweden. In 1930, the owner saw a lady dressed in grey at the house. She was walking slowly towards him through the big hall, but decided to take a turn at the expedition room, the office where the vicars used to work. He wanted to talk to her, ask her what she was doing inside his house, but when he got to the exhibition room, there was no one there. Next, a couple moved in 1936, and they heard footsteps walking through the house, and doors were opening and closing as if someone was moving from one room to another. When they wanted to welcome the visitor, they saw nobody. Then the wife was home alone one day when she heard music coming from behind the closed door. She opened the kitchen door and the music suddenly stopped. This happened again later when her husband was back home. Then, in 1945, another man moved in and he brought a rocking chair. One night, when he was reading a book in it, he was pushed out of the chair so violently that he fell to the ground. When he tried again, it was as if he was blocked from it and he fell again. The rocking chair also started moving on its own. Now, each room here has its own little story, with guests reporting seeing shadows, hearing furniture move, and much more.
Starting us off in at number 10, we have Villisca Axe Murderer House of Villisca, Iowa, easily the most notable murders out of Iowa. This story has haunted the town of Villisca since 1912. On June 10th of that year, the new house got a new nickname, the Axe Murder House, after a gruesome murder took place. Josiah B. Moore and his wife, along with their 4 young children and 2 guests of the family, were bludgeoned to death with, you guys guessed it, an axe. Well, what's more, they never identified who did it to them. The authorities investigated for 10 years and had famous grand jury trials over what would be called today as, well, famously said by Donald Trump, is fake news. Slander lawsuits took place and many political careers were broken because of it all.
Information that was false and fake and never happened got released to the public.
As the story goes, the family had a normal day leading up to the evening, with their kids at a Sunday school program and their 2 neighbors joining and spending the night. The axe used was already on the Moore property and is the ominous weapon used against the 8 victims. But the strangest thing about this eerie tale is that the axe was found next to a pond of bacon, and all of the windows and mirrors were covered up with clothes and piece of wood from furniture. There was blood everywhere, and there was a plate of uneaten food. Is this real life right now? I have no idea what is going on. The mysterious killer must have had to go on to the next family, because from 1911 to 1912 there was a slew of other eerily similar axe murderers in Iowa. There is said to be as many as 24 similar murders cases that were never solved. Number 9, the Winchester Mystery House, San Jose, California. This is the story of Sarah Lockwood Winchester and the mystery behind her choice to do construction on the house every single day from when she moved in. Her late husband, William Wirt Winchester, is the man responsible for the Winchester rifle, a historically famous gun that is said to have, won the West. Well, they had a baby girl who died 6 weeks after birth, and her husband passed away shortly after that from tuberculosis. Legends have it that Sarah had spoken to a fortune teller of sorts who told her to leave her home in Connecticut and move west. She chose San Jose, but it gets even more strange. This medium had told her that the bad fortune that her family had was because of the men that were killed at the hands of the famous Winchester rifle, and that she needed to build a house big enough for all of them if she wanted to remain alive. Well, this house is a whopping 24,000 square feet. I can't imagine how many bathrooms are in that place. The house was under 24/7, 365 construction for 38 years. Absolutely insane. She really wanted to take the advice seriously. You can just imagine how insane that would be. Just to give you guys a hint, there are 10,000 windows 47 stairways, and 6 kitchens, because why not? You never know what room you're in where you're gonna get hungry. Alright, moving right along on this list, at number 8 we have the Sultan's Palace, New Orleans, the house at 1716 Dauphine Street, which is a classic French Quarter palace. In 1836, it was said to be leased by the Turkish Sultan when the owner was in a bind, but they needed money but they didn't want to sell it. For months, parties took place that were said to have uniformed men and beautiful women in. Well, concern from the neighbors came when it obviously turned it into an opium den and could hear screams over the loud music that was constantly playing. No one knew what truly went on in that house unless they went in themselves. But the great mystery of the house was the Sultan's demise. One morning, a passerby noticed that there was blood dripping from the windows and front steps of the palace. Police arrived on the scene only to find men and women and children scattered around the property, dismembered. Their body parts was virtually everywhere. Is this real life right now? They found one man buried in the courtyard who initially assumed to be the Sultan, but it was in fact his brother. Coming in hot at number 7 of this list, we have a Moundsville Penitentiary, West Virginia. Well, you might recognize this old prison if you were to see it. MTV's Fear Show made it famous again. The decommissioned prison had thought to be haunted before it was shut down and reopened again for tours. Aside from MTV, there have been a ton of ghost hunters, documentary filmmakers. I mean, why not? This place is creepy, it's haunted. I mean, probably Sam and Dean Winchester, they're probably gonna go there as well. Ed and Lorraine Warren, they probably had to holy water a lot of beings, a lot of creatures and demons. Well, this prison holds up to 2,000 prisoners. They executed almost 100 prisoners who is said to have haunted the prison to this day, and nearly 1,000 dead in total. The building was decommissioned in 1995 and now only exists for public tours. Fun fact, actually, Charles Manson once petitioned to be transferred to this location. I'm not sure why. I mean, this guy's crazy.
You don't understand me. That's your trouble.
Number 6, we're bringing you St. Augustine Lighthouse, St. Augustine in Florida. Well, some say this is the most haunted lighthouse in America. It's also the oldest. It might be one of the most haunted ones in the world. Many people lost their lives in or around the lighthouse, and it is believed that their spirits never left the ground. One of the most famous ghost stories from this, pretty eerie place is the 2 petite sisters that can be heard giggling at night. Now, if I'm sleeping in bed and I'm hearing people laughing, I don't think that's too funny. I would be horrified. Their father worked at a lighthouse, and through an unforeseen accident, the 2 sisters and their friend had fallen off the cliff and drowned. This may not have been no accident. Another tale of the lighthouse keeper's ghost is said to have spent the last 100 years around the property after falling to his sudden death. Some even say he doesn't even know he's dead, and he's just been seen walking around smoking a cigar. Number 5, we've got the Myrtles Plantation in St. Francisville, Louisiana, built on top of an Indian burial ground back in 1796. I'm not sure why people are building things on like cemeteries. You hear about like all these churches being built on cemeteries, or you're just building things on dead people. Why? Well, this sprawling plantation is said to be haunted by at least 12 different ghosts. It is now being turned into a bed and breakfast. Definitely not a place I want to get up in the morning. I'm not having my coffee on top of a dead person. But let me tell you guys a little bit about Chloe. Well, Chloe is said to be the most vengeful of the ghosts that occupied this property. Well, she was hung from a tree after poisoning her slave's master's wife and 2 children with cake. Chloe sought revenge after her death, and we've even found pictures that have been taken present time with a vision of a little girl in a green dress and a head turban on the property and in the windows as people tour and take pictures of their time there. Another ghost still calls this plantation home. A man was shot by the owner of the house after the Chloe era. I mean, there's a lot of history going on in that place. Our number 4, we have a Bell Witch Cave, Adams, Tennessee. This 320-acre home was purchased by the Bell family back in 1804. John Bell was a farmer, and he moved there with his wife and children. But 13 years after they had settled, they started to notice paranormal activity. The legend says that the family started to notice animals roaming the property and sounds of chains being dragged through the house. Over the years, Bell had reported to others that the presence began speaking to him and said her name was Kate, the Bell's witch. This Kate character tormented the family, but specifically John's daughter Betsy, scratching her, pulling her hair, and pinching her. It is believed that she was trying to stop Betsy's engagement, and when Betsy finally broke down, Kate said that she would leave her alone and return in 7 years. And again in 104 years. I'm pretty sure I'm not going to be around, so you can do whatever you want to me. Some people think Kate never left because the entire town continued to experience her wrath. Finally, in at number 3, we have one of the most haunted places in America. We have Drummond, Arizona. It is said to be an entire haunted town. So we're not talking about like a building or a cemetery. We're talking about the whole damn place here. It is specifically known for the Drummond Hotel, which was formerly built and used as a hospital and an insane asylum, because why not? A hospital that has over 9,000 deaths. Originally built in 1927, the hospital had a short lifespan, and it sat vacant for nearly 4 decades before it was turned into the Drummond Grand Hotel in 1996. The haunting started right away and were said to be the ghosts of the tortured asylum patients. Keep an eye or an arrow for Claude Harvey, who was a maintenance man on the property in 1935. His body was found pinned underneath an elevator. Even though the elevator had not crushed him, it appeared though he was murdered and his body was just dumped there. Or maybe he was just left there, he wasn't crushed, and maybe he just died from starvation. Or maybe he saw a spider and freaked out under there. Well, there is at least 5 other ghost sightings that include women and children, and several freak accidents that have happened at this property, including a man confined to a wheelchair falling to his death from a balcony, and in the same haunted room, a man killed himself. And also, make sure you guys don't ask about room 32. Number 2 on this list, we have Steps Cemetery, Benton, Louisiana. So it's kind of obvious that cemeteries are creepy and should be avoided, well, unless you need to pay your respects. But one little spot in Louisiana, well, it's said to be the former home of a cult that sacrificed animals and had orgies. I mean, I'm not making this stuff up. Our research did not determine if it was in that order. There's many stories about this, specifically in volume 5 of an old Indiana folklore book. But one that stands out is of a baby who passed away, and the mother was so distraught, she dug up a burial site for the infant, and she could still be roaming around the area today, weeping and dressed in black near her daughter's grave. You might think all cemeteries look the same, but when you get to this one, you'll definitely notice that most of the gravestones are cracked or broken, which is a bad omen in itself. Number 1 on this list, we have Moon River Brewery, Savannah, Georgia, the American Institute of Paranormal Psychology, which is obviously why we put this in the number 1 spot. New owners of the brewery noticed that something was up when they purchased it in the 90s, although it's been uninhabited for decades. Well, we all remember that our first beer and drunken shenanigans can get out of hand, but not bottles flying out of thin air and smashing against a wall kind of sort of hand, you know? So imagine just getting drunk and all of a sudden a beer just goes flying out of nowhere and you're the only one in that room. Well, the building back then served as a hospital and hundreds of people died with yellow fever. Well, these ghosts take up every edge of the brewery with special attention on the 2nd floor, or of course the basement. One woman was pushed down the stairs while the other had a frightening experience in the woman's bathroom. I wonder if the ghosts are getting drunk there. I'm not even sure if ghosts can get drunk. Imagine being a ghost, you're getting drunk and you're messing with people. And number 10, the Shanghai Tunnels in Portland, Oregon. Portland was one of the most dangerous ports in the United States during the early 19th century, and it was the epicenter of Shanhang, a form of human trafficking. It's crazy to think human trafficking still happens today and tunnels are still the way to do it. According to the local lore, swindlers preyed upon unsuspected men in the local salons, which were often outfitted with trap doors that deposited the victims directly into a network of underground tunnels. These men were supposedly held captive, drugged, and eventually transported to the waterfront, where they were sold to ships as unpaid laborers, aka slaves. Some worked for several years before finding their way back home. The tunnels are said to be haunted by the aggrieved spirits of the captives who died in the dark recesses behind the city. Random fact, the practice of kidnapping men to work on ships came to be known as Shanghing because the ships that were sold to were often headed to East Asia. Number 9, Eastern State Penitentiary, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. The castle-like Eastern State Penitentiary took solitary confinement to whole new levels when it was built in 1829. Prisoners lived alone, exercised alone, and ate alone. When inmates were left in a cell, a guard would cover his head with a hood so he wouldn't be seen. The prison had to abandon its solitary confinement system due to overcrowding from 1913 until it was closed in 1970. Although the forms of punishment did not get any less severe, I mean, chaining an inmate's tongue to his wrists, that's just one example, a true story. The site's one of most haunted places in America right now. Well, it welcomes thousands of visitors every year, both for its museums and annual Terror Behind the Wall celebration, which features 6 haunted attractions within the prison walls for Halloween. I mean, when you talk about an attraction inside of a prison, no thanks. Well, it was reported paranormal happenings have included dismembered laughter, shadowy figures, and pacing of footsteps. Sorry, I thought I was hearing footsteps behind me right now. Okay, I'm pretty freaked out with this one, so let's move on to the next one. So next up, number 8, we have House of the Seven Gables, Salem, Massachusetts. Now, this house did not steal its name from the classic novel. In fact, it inspired the novel itself. Salem is known for its history of the famous witch trials, and that's where Sabrina Spellman lived, but it happens to be the birthplace of Nathaniel Hawthorne, who used this 17th century house as inspiration for his famous 1851 novel, The House of the Seven Gables. Aside from its beautiful yet spooky facade, the house is surrounded by paranormal activity and ghost sightings, all based on personal experiences of staff. Every October, the house offers spooky tours as well as weekly performances of 2 plays. The Legacy of the Hanging Judge and Spirit of the Gables. Would you guys see a play in a haunted town's haunted house? Coming in hot at number 7 on this list, the Stanley Hotel in Estes Park. If you've read or seen The Shining, you know the feeling of this often snowbound hotel. It's the location Stephen King based his Overlook Hotel upon. It may not look like the film unless you watch the 1990s made-for-TV movie version, which, yeah, I don't think anyone has. I mean, just walking to your room can drain you. So one stiff drink might have you seeing ghosts, or a couple kids chanting, "Red rum, red rum." Number 6, we're bringing you Red Onion Saloon, Skagway, Alaska, established in 1898. As a brothel for miners during the Klondike Gold Rush, Alaska's Red Onion Saloon, it had a feature that set it apart from other bordellos. It used dolls to help run its business, so always a good sign, right? Well, every day 10 dolls would be placed on the bar downstairs, each one representing one of the ladies working in the upstairs room. A customer would choose one of the dolls, at which point it would lay down on the bar to indicate that particular workers were occupied. When the customers came back downstairs, the doll would be returned to her sitting position to let other potential clients know that she was available. Well, fast forward to 2019, when the Red Onion Saloon still operates as a bar and restaurant, yet the dolls are still on display, and it offers tours of the upstairs rooms, which are preserved as sort of like a mixed-shaped brothel museum. As if these dolls weren't creepy enough, there were reports of Lydia, a former madame of a brothel, haunting the site, complete with cold spots and lingering spells of perfume rafting through the walls. I mean, all creepiness aside, I'm more curious about how this place got named Red Onion. I mean, they could have came up with any other name. Well, let me know what you guys would call this in the comment section below. Give me a name. Alright, we're halfway on this list. Number 5, we got RMS Queen Mary in Long Beach, California. This retired ocean liner sailed the Atlantic Ocean from 1936 to 1967. During the first 3 years at sea, the Queen Mary carried Hollywood celebrities like Elizabeth Taylor. Her days as a luxurious ship were short-lived. In 1939, she was stripped of her amenities and began her second life as a gray ghost, a World War II troop ship. At the conclusion of the war, she was restored to her former glory and traversed the Atlantic for nearly 2 more decades. On Halloween 1967, the Queen Mary departed on her last cruise, eventually docking in Long Beach, California, her final resting place. The ship is reportedly haunted by the spirits of those who died aboard, such as the young sailor who was crushed to death by a door in the engine room and a crew member who was murdered in cabin B340. Number 4, Lizzie Borden Bed and Breakfast in Fall River. So this location came up on nearly every search on our quest to find this top 10 list for you guys. Well, you've likely heard of the children's rhyme Lizzie Borden took an axe, gave it to her mother 40 whacks. When she saw what she had done, she gave her father 41. Well, you can not only visit the scene of that famous 1892 double homicide, you can also sleep at the Borden's home, eat their last meal, Johnny cakes of thick cornmeal pancakes and eggs, in case you were wondering, and spend the last nights in the bedroom where the bodies of Lizzie's stepmother Abigail was found. Someone who stayed there said, "I can attest, this home painstakingly furnished to look exactly as it did on the morning of the murders. Well, that will creep you right out." Better though, the 175-year-old property hosts up to 20 overnight guests, in which some of them, for some reason, it's a tradition when you go to this place, they will actually whip out a Ouija board. I mean, I'm not down for Ouija, that is a real life situation that can happen, and let alone whipping out a Ouija board in a haunted place. Finally, down to number 3 on this list, we have Crescent Hotel, Erica Springs, Arkansas. Since its construction in 1886, the Crescent Hotel has served several purposes: luxury resorts, conservatory for young women, junior college, but the strangest mark on its history came in 1937 when it got a new owner, Norman G. Baker. Baker was a millionaire inventor who decided to pose as a doctor despite having no medical training, and turned the hotel into a hospital that can cure cancer. Well, he was eventually found out and he was ran out of town, although reports say that his spirits found its way back to the site and found some otherworldly company too. The now operating Crescent Hotel is said to be haunted by at least 8 ghosts, ranging from a 5-year-old girl to a bearded man wearing Victorian clothing. 1 ghost is enough for me, never mind 8 of them, and children ghosts, I think those were the absolute scariest kind. Number 2 on this list, Heaven's Gate mass suicide site in Rancho Santa Fe. I mean, when you have the word suicide site, yeah, no thanks, not for this brown guy. The golf course strewn San Diego suburb of Rancho Santa Fe regularly makes the most expensive zip codes in the USA. So it came a stunner in 1997 when the world learned it was the home to Heaven's Gate, a cult whose 39 members drank poisoned Kool-Aid as the Hale-Bopp comet passed Earth, believing that aliens behind the comet would rupture their souls to heaven. Yeah, really weird, I'm not making this stuff up. Their bodies were found dressing in black sweatshirts and sweatpants, Nike sneakers, faces covered with purple cloth, and carrying $5.75 in one pocket. A toll of people speculated to catch a ride on the comet. And number 1, we have Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum, Western West Virginia. This foreboding asylum began construction in 1858 and opened to patients in 1864. The massive structure was designed by architect Richard Andrews to maximize sunlight and fresh air. It was believed that the building itself would serve as a healing environment. It was designed for 250 people housed and 2,400 patients in crowded conditions. I mean, that's a pretty big range, going from 250 to 2,400. Patients were physically restrained and often given inhumane treatments such as the electroshock therapy and lobotomies, which was very popular back in the day. After more than a century in operation, the facility was forced to close in 1994, which, when you think about it, wasn't too long ago, within the last 30 years. And it was due to the reforms in mental health and treatment and the deterioration of the building. Hundreds of patients died during the asylum tenure, and scores of guests and ghost hunters have claimed they're seeing shadowy figures roaming around the facility.
At number 10, we have Salem, Massachusetts, USA, a town revered by the occult and has a dark enough history to make any horror fan squeal with glee. Salem, Massachusetts was the home of the 1692 Salem witch trials. This is where a massive witch hunt led to the hanging of 19 people who were falsely accused of using witchcraft. There are several spots around the town that give off an extremely creepy vibe and have reported hauntings, but the most notorious place is the former home of Sheriff George Corwin. He was the man responsible for spearheading the hunting and capturing of these witches. Not only that, but the people that were captured, he would take them into his basement and then he would torture these people until they confessed to their crimes. Now his ghost and the ghosts of several other people who were tortured by him haunt the Joshua Ward House, which is the building that sits on the land that the sheriff's house used to be on. At number 9, we have the Fairmont Hotel in Banff, Canada. If you have never been to Banff, it is one of the most beautiful places in the whole world. There's amazing skiing in the winter, and in the summer it turns into a lush green wonderland. If you were a ghost, this would be a paradise to haunt. The Fairmont sits on top of a mountain that looks so regal it could double as the Grand Budapest Hotel. It was built in 1888 and it was the center point to increase tourism in the area, and it worked. But like any old building, this place has adopted some guests that refuse to check out. There are two ghosts that are responsible for the majority of the ghost sightings, one being that of an old bellhop. He was the employee of the hotel back in the 70s, and after he kicked the bucket, he decided that retirement wasn't for him. His ghost has been seen throughout the hotel, helping people to this day. Very few people get to do what they love. Why let a little thing like death stop you from sticking to your passion? Another ghost is that of the bride dressed all in white. The story goes that she tripped down a staircase on the day of her wedding and met a grim ending. That is a huge bummer. You're about to make it to the altar and you lose your footing. Oh, that sucks. At number 8, we have the Chinoi Church in Beijing, China. An old mysterious building that sits in Beijing, China. There are several elements to this building that make it an intriguing place for anyone interested in the supernatural. First, no one knows who built the building or who commissioned the building to be built, almost as if an outside force created the building, like the devil came to town and was like, yeah, let's build a church. Also, on the front door of the building there is a note that makes it very clear that there are no ghosts inside, which is super sus. Like where I live, there's no note about ghosts because it's just a given. We know there's no ghosts. This place uses the used car salesman approach to convincing people. Yeah, that rickety noise in the back? Oh, that's just something the car makes. It's an added feature. The residence is haunted by the ghost of a young woman who killed herself by hanging during the Communist War in China. Some say she did this because her husband was killed at war, and others say she was trying to avoid capture. At number 7, we have the Shanghai Tunnels in Portland, USA. A Shanghai tunnel sounds like a place where you go to bet on horse racing and eat the best fried rice you've ever had in your life. But it actually used to be the epicenter for human trafficking in the United States. Located in Portland, Oregon, the tunnels are now run down and unused. Back in the 19th century, people walking through these tunnels would often be kidnapped and then sold overseas into slave labor. Some bars above these tunnels had trap doors in them, which they would use to take drunk people, slip them down into the tunnels where they would never be seen again. A lot of people died in these tunnels before they were sold off into slavery. Now it's said that their angry ghosts walk the halls. Screaming, banging, and even weeping can be heard when you pass through these tunnels. At number 6, we have La Château de Brisac, France. We are heading all over the world with this list, and now we're heading to a place that has a long, rich history, France. It makes sense to waltz right into a castle. Besides being one of the most glorious buildings in all of France, an exciting reason to visit this place is the spectral tourist attraction. Back during the reign of King Charles VII, he was married to a beautiful woman who he unfortunately found out was cheating on him. He wasn't too happy with this, so he divorced her, and that was that. I'm just kidding. It was the 1400s. He also had her killed for insulting his honor. That's how they did things back then. When her life ended, she was wearing a green dress. Now it's said you can see the ghost of a woman in a green dress walking the halls, moaning for her lost love. At number 5, we have Morgan House, Kalimpong, India. The estate formerly owned by the Morgans has a rather dark past. The house was lived in by Baron George Morgan and his wife back in the 1930s. Apparently Mr. Morgan would spend a lot of his free time torturing his wife. With them being in India and his wife having nowhere to go, she eventually fell into a depression. Not long after that, she died. The two never had any kids, and after Mr. Morgan died, the Indian government took control of the property. It has now been spruced up into a nice hotel, but the terrors of this building's past haven't been washed away. Mrs. Morgan is free from her husband and has no interest in leaving her home. Many patrons of the hotel say they have heard her high heels walking along the wooden floors. At number 4, we have Casa Loma, Toronto, Canada. The most famously haunted place in all of Toronto. It's literally a massive castle that is a 10-minute drive from the world famous CN Tower. It's strange having a massive stone castle built in the early 20th century so close to the downtown core, but that's probably why it's so haunted. All the ghosts want to gather there because it feels like home. One of the most haunted areas of the castle are the secret underground tunnels which connect different sections of the property. There have been reports of a ghostly miner who might have died digging the tunnels and a lady in a white dress. Also, the castle's former owner, Lady Mary Pellet, has been seen all throughout the building. Some people say they've tried to take a picture of her when she's walking through, and she will use her ghostly powers to turn off your camera. Sounds like she's not very photogenic. If you want to give yourself an extra fright, you should come check out the castle in October when they turn the whole thing into a massive haunted house. I've been, it's a great time. At number 3 we have the Hill of Crosses in Lithuania. The look of this place will make you say, oh yeah, there are for sure some ghosts in here. This hill has been the site of rebellion, respect, and remembering the dead for the past 500 years. People have come here to place crosses as a way to pay good fortune to those who died fighting for the freedom of Lithuania. This practice has made it a safe haven for spirits to walk through, and there have been reports of seances performed there trying to contact these dead heroes. There are currently over 100,000 crosses piled up on this hill. Back in the Soviet reign, they tried to destroy this holy landmark 3 times. Three times. But the Lithuanian people stood strong and came back to rebuild it every time. That's a pretty awesome story of solidarity. I know why ghosts want to hang out here. They're like, I know my home will be safe forever. At number 2 we have Cemetery Number 1 in New Orleans, USA. This place has been nicknamed the Haunted City because it is literally filled with so many graves that you could fill a small theater. There are over 700 graves at this site. You pack that many people into one spot and you are guaranteed some strange spirits walking around. On Halloween it must be like a massive party in there. It would be a giant ghost rave with the coolest people from the last 200 years. The grave that gets the most attention is that of former voodoo priestess Marie Laveau. It said she had the power to influence spirits, and now even in death her ghost can gain strength from the graveyard and get the phantoms to do her bidding. I mean, that's a good skill to have after you're dead. You're like, oh, you guys, you work for me. That's how this is gonna work. And for the number 1 spot we have the Rose Hall in Montego Bay, Jamaica. A beautiful mansion that used to be the home of the Palmers back in the 19th century. The two were a loving couple, or that's what the public thought. Mr. Palmer died one day of suspicious causes, but foul play was inconclusive. Annie Palmer took control of the property, and people weren't too suspicious until her 2 following husbands and her parents died, all without warning. Now things are getting a little suspicious. The urban legend of Annie Palmer is that she was a witch and she would use dark magic to kill her victims. It's said that her evil spirit still inhabits the Rose Hall. A witch ghost sounds pretty serious, especially one that has killed people. That's not something you want to disturb for your own entertainment, right? Well, you totally can. You can take tours of the building which highlight all the legends surrounding the witch of the Rose Hall. And if you really want to bring some bad mojo into your life, you can take part in a seance to communicate with the spirit of Annie Palmer. I think the ghost of a murderous witch isn't something I would want to hang out with. Alright everyone, that is our list, and as promised I'm going to be doing some more pet shoutouts which you guys love so much. If you want me to shout out your pet, you can hit me up on Instagram. I pick new pets every day, so if you don't get picked one day, feel free to message again another day. And if it takes me a little long to get back to you, I am very sorry because I have so many of these to do, but I also love the fans getting involved in all this stuff. It makes me feel great. Love you guys. First we have Susan's dog Ella. This guy is ready for Christmas all year round. I love that snowy picture and that hat, it's so great. Michael sent in a picture of his dog Slater. This is a long boy having a good snooze, I love it. Alex sent in a picture of Rebel. That's a little small boy. Look, he's so little. I want to put him in like a little purse or something, carry him around. Next we have Haley's dog Gunner. This boy has got some big eyes. I think he sees some snackos. Alexandra sent in her cat Gracie. She looks all silly rolling around like that. I love it. And finally we have Angie's guinea pig Svetlana. I love how guinea pigs always have a shocked look on their face, like they just came back from war. They're like, ugh.
Off this list in our number 10 spot we have Koh Lip Island. I'll be honest, this is a place that despite the spooky tales is probably still on many people's travel destinations list because it is so beautiful. Like much of Thailand, it truly is seemingly idyllic. When it comes to the haunting scene here, we turn to those who inhabit the island, the Chow Lei people. They claim to share their island with the whole host of spirits that they call the Ha Tao. You would think that a ghost-filled island would keep people away, but they've found their own way to keep these spirits appeased, and that is by offering them strawberry pop and cupcakes. I mean, apparently it pays to be a spirit. Sounds pretty awesome. You get to chill on an island and you get pop and cupcakes. Despite the incredible scenery and the amazing hospitality of those who are local to the island, many people report feeling some sort of uneasy presence on Koh Lip Island.
Number 9. Wat Sin Suk Hell Garden. Gardens are supposed to be peaceful. They're supposed to be a place to grow, reflect, swat bees for hours on end, all that good stuff. But when it comes to the Wat Sin Suk Hell Garden, you won't be finding any peace whatsoever. This one one's a little odd, a little spooky. Thailand is very spiritual, and this specific garden is home to hundreds of sculptures, each depicting the horrors that are awaiting in Buddhist hell. Yeah, they're very scary to look at. Unlike other gardens in Thailand, this one was built quite recently, believe it or not. The Hell Garden was built in 1986. Now the idea is to keep you from committing any sins, and I gotta admit, they nailed it. Yeah, pretty much did the best they could. Olivia and I like to walk through graveyards for fun sometimes, so I don't know. I personally would love to walk through this. Would you do it?
In our number 8 spot today, we have Mae Ram Phung Beach. For this one, we are taking a trip to the eastern coast of Thailand to the Rayong province. Here lies this beach, which attracts tourists from all over the world. Earlier this year, the shores of this beach were actually hit with the results of an oil spill, but that isn't the most frightening thing that's happened here. Apparently, this area saw a few people who lost their lives in the water, and these horrible incidents happened quite close together. Since then, people have reported a sort of uneasy feeling as they visited the beach, and some have even claimed to have left feeling haunted and have not been able to shake the feeling.
Number 7, Koh Kam Noi Ghost Island. Love the name, Ghost Island. Really gets to the point for this next one here. I like it. Ghost Island, Koh Kam Noi, is located in the eastern Gulf of Thailand. Now it's close to the Chonburi province. There is a plethora of reasons why this island is for sure haunted. Let's list them. During World War II, American soldiers constructed a base on the island. The deep waters surrounding the islands made it a pretty ideal stop for large warships. Now, unfortunately, there were swarms of mosquitoes that were also sharing the same island. So a great amount of those soldiers died and had to be buried on Koh Nam Noi Island. Now today, there's a Muslim cemetery on the one side and a Chinese cemetery on the other. All things considered, I couldn't imagine a more peaceful resting place.
In our number 6 spot today, we have Ayutthaya Historical Park. This national park is a place with incredibly rich history, and it is actually a UNESCO World Heritage Site. The site was founded in 1350 and it became the second capital of Siam after Sukhothai. The site ended up being destroyed by the Burmese in the 18th century, but despite these ruins, even today you can still get the sense of how wonderful this place once was. With history like this, it's definitely no surprise that this place is said to be haunted. The most popular haunting story from this location is in regards to the ghost of Pu Sam Phao Sap, who is said to guard the city's treasures. Even Prince Bira of Siam reported seeing this ghostly apparition, and not many people can say that they have a royal backing them up when it comes to their paranormal claims.
Number 5, River Kwai Bridge. I don't like bridges in general. I have no idea how they work structurally. It freaks me out when I look at them and to think about them. When it comes to Hellfire Pass, no chance, not gonna do that one. First of all, big fan of the name. These are all scary names. They hint towards the impending doom. I kinda like it. The River Kwai Bridge saw brutal combat during World War II, but the Death Railway alias actually comes from the dark history during the initial construction of the River Kwai Bridge, where a countless number of prisoners or tradesmen all lost their lives while laying the 260-mile long track. The track runs from Thailand to Burma, and almost all of it is deemed haunted. So yeah, big note from me. Hard pass on this pass.
In our number 4 spot today, we have Tui Watana Deserted House. If you've seen Final Destination, the vibes that this spooky abandoned house is giving will definitely be a little familiar. Legend goes that a group of friends entered this house once to have a little fun in a place they probably shouldn't have been. You know, young people, everyone did stupid stuff, but it turns out there might be a higher price to pay when it comes to this place. Since then, it is said that this group of friends has seen members of the group dying in some strange or very elaborate circumstances. One passed away in a car accident, the other in a house fire. It is said that the remaining members of the group believes that they may have been the target of a vengeful spirit that was angry that they entered that house. I hope they all stay far away from roller coasters and tanning beds for sure, and maybe just don't drive behind any trucks carrying wood, just to be safe.
Number 3, the Sathorn Unique. Commonly referred to as, you guessed it, Ghost Tower, the Sathorn Unique is a colossal unfinished skyscraper, and it's gonna stay that way for probably ever. Upon first glance, this looks like any city, right? Cranes sticking out of the building, there's scaffolding just waving like a flag in the wind, it's the usual. Now, not all these construction zones, however, have this many reports of paranormal activity. This building looks massive. You stare up from the streets of downtown Bangkok and you get get the chills. Even though construction began in the 90s, the building still has not been completed post-financial crisis. Now, one major incident that deems the Southern unique as haunted took place in December 2014. A photographer snuck into the building to take photos of the sunrise, but instead found the body of a Swedish man on the 43rd floor. It was determined that the man had sadly taken his own life.
In our number 2 spot today, we have the Biok Sky Hotel. The haunting tales of this location can be attributed to the significant number of workforce deaths that have been reported here. During the construction of this luxury hotel, it is said that 3 of the workers fell to their rather untimely deaths. Now, this sky-high tower is said to be haunted by the souls of those who fell. Both staff of the hotel as well as guests staying there have reported seeing things like shadows lurking through the hallways. It doesn't stop here, however. Some guests have even reported their items being moved seemingly on their own, and there's also been reports of just a general feeling of uneasiness, a feeling like they're being watched. It truly gives me shivers just thinking about it, but I'm sure stories like this only make this hotel more desirable for those interested in all things paranormal.
And finally, number 1, Bongpyu Shoe Factory. We'll finish this list off with an abandoned shoe factory located in Samut Prakan. The factory suffered this freak accident that sadly led to many casualties of workers. The air compressor malfunctioned in some way and ultimately it erupted. It was quite fast and very tragic, but the factory owner continued business afterwards anyways. Now after that point, workers one by one ended up leaving. They were quitting their jobs on the spot, all claiming to have encountered the spirits of the previous workers who had lost their lives. Now word spread quite fast, so business slowed down drastically. The owner as well sadly took their own life in the same factory. So it's no surprise that the building remains untouched still to this day.